it's a soul snapshot that is, like I said, completely unique to you. Like, I'm an emotional authority, so I what I learned that was most beneficial for me is that I was always pressured in my life to make immediate decisions about things that really led to extreme stress and anxiety, because my body needed the time to process both the low and the high of an emotional wave before making a really big decision about something.
Welcome to the Intuitive You podcast, where we explore the concept of intuition from multiple perspectives, learn how intuition manifests itself, and the various ways it is naturally utilized in our world and daily living. I'm your host, Chantal Denise Gosselin, a scientist, a lifelong seeker of knowledge, an intuition teacher, and a passionate educator. Get ready as we dive into the mysteries of intuition and discover how it can enhance our lives and change our world. Welcome to this episode of the Intuitive You podcast. Today's podcast is called Intuition, Not a One Size Fits All, and we have a beautiful guest today, Sabina Seibel, and she's an intuitive life coach, an evolutionary astrologer. She has a Bachelor of Art in History and Art and Science, with a focus on art history, psychology, and a minor in philosophy. And you also have a background as a horse racing jockey, which is relevant. We'll talk about this in a bit, for 10 years. And you also told me that you learned your intuitive process through your connection with horses. So Sabina, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks you. This is really fun. I'm excited.
So first, I want to ask you about your journey with intuition. How did it all start for you?
Well, I had several experiences as a smaller child with mediumship, with connecting with some ancestors, though I wasn't completely aware of who they were at the time. But one specific one was with my grandfather after he had passed. And I felt him sit next to me on the bed after he had passed, letting me know that he was all right. And it was a very strong, it was very strong for me. But as I got older, I really disconnected from those experiences and those memories because I was in the horse industry very competitively early on, and I couldn't bridge the two. So I had to leave it kind of behind and didn't come back to it until I was actually horse racing, and I had an experience where my intuition saved my life, and I can share more about that if you like.
Yes, please. But before we dive into that, you mentioned something important about you tapping into that intuition, that side of you as a child, but then disconnecting from it. And so I'm curious to know, were there any other instances in your life where you disconnected from your own self, from your intuition, because just, life just happens and we get like pulled away from our essence?
I think, heavily in my conditioning was to be very logical in my mind and not listen to my intuition. And so it became kind of negated, like it wasn't preferential. And it was about being very intellectual and being well educated and being logical, and that I made all my decisions from there. But it didn't always serve me, and I felt like I was always missing some information. And so horses really taught me about my intuitive capabilities and my intuitive connection with myself, realizing that they are the truth tellers. They are the ultimate truth teller. They're a mirror, and whatever you're feeling emotionally is a vibration and a frequency that they pick up and mirror back to you. So if there are any listeners that are horse people, you'll know that you can't fake a horse out. If you genuinely are feeling major anxiety or fear, they will mirror that back to you. Or if you're feeling a little bit too big for your britches, they will humble you and say, hold on a second, you need to check yourself here, because we're not working compatibly together, because you're in your ego. and they'll keep you as real as possible. And so in that process, I really learned how to reconnect with my intuition that
Mm.
way.
Well said. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's something important here when you talk about the horses being like almost like a reflection of one's own feelings and intuition. So back to that, you did share with me a somatic experience that you lived with a horse where you almost died or got really injured, but then came out with barely any scratch. So please share with us that experience.
So I connect to being mostly a clairsentient intuitive or a somatic intuitive, because of being a professional athlete for 10 years, I communicate and have a really strong body awareness. And so when I receive messages, I literally am a conduit through my body. And that's how I receive the majority of my messages, though I use the other clairs. In this instance, I was on a very fractious horse right before the gates were supposed to open for a race, and she flipped over backwards, and I ended up underneath her in the starting gate under the pontoons. And for however long it felt for me, I came out of there. There was a higher intelligence in my body that took over. It was complete. There was no conscious connection to saving my own life, and that there was this somatic intuitive response that kept me out of harm's way under 1,200 pounds of scrambling fractious horse. And I came away unscathed, and there were 9 people standing around, waiting for the horses to break for a race, that couldn't believe that I survived without a scratch, that I got away without a scratch.
That's amazing. So when you mentioned that you felt it in your body, like almost like a cellular memory, like a somatic memory telling you what to do to avoid being injured, is that how you could describe it?
Yes, but like I said, it wasn't conscious. I have no conscious recollection of how I got away from there.
Mhm.
But whatever the cellular somatic intuitive connection was for me, knew exactly what to do to keep me safe.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I like that. It brings me back to a little bit of the research by Dr. Gary Klein, because as you know, Sabina, I do a lot of research on intuition, and I want to explore that deeper. So I kind of want to take a moment here to share with you and our listeners that one part of intuition comes from previous experience, where somewhere in our body, in our mind, it kind of like gets stored without us recollecting consciously of that memory. And so those memories can also be stored somatically, and somatic means in our body. So it's kind of like one way for our intuition to speak to us based on previous experience. And that's kind of like what Gary Klein is all about, scientifically proven with his research. So I think it's pretty cool that,
I mean, that's spot on my
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Though it's different for everybody. It's unique to everybody.
Absolutely. And so for those of you who are listening and you haven't watched or listened to the previous episodes, if you want to learn more about the different clairs, the different ways that intuition can speak to us, one can be through somatic or our bodies, one can be through clairvoyance, so like visions or imagination. And also I have another episode that talks a bit more about the science behind intuition. So if you want to learn more about that, you can listen to this episode.
Yeah, I mean, even smelling things sometimes,
Yes.
all of a sudden, clairalience, you
Yes.
you walk by and you smell something that makes no sense logically, that you've just smelled it, and then you can make the connection. So it happens in so many different ways for
Different
people.
people.
Yeah.
Which
What about you? Do you tap into different clairs, or do you have one that's dominant?
So I'm very similar to you. So for me, it's in my body. So the somatic one and the sentient. So being able to like sense other people's emotions and energy. And I think that's a very common one when we walk into a room. We're like, oh, there's a weird vibe here, or you can sense someone's vibe or energy. That's where I tap into my intuition the strongest. And I would say that since I allowed myself to tap into my intuition, my clairvoyance or my visions are much more clearer, and also in my dreams. That's a big one for me. But just like you mentioned, When from a young age, sometimes we're highly intuitive. Kids have a lot of imagination. They're very in tune, just like horses or cats. If you have any animals, your dog will know, your cat will sense what's happening. Children are also very sensitive. But then as we grow up, we kind of like desensitize ourselves because life is tough. And then, imagine if at school they would teach you how to tap into your intuition as much as they teach you how to do math. Well, maybe we could learn how to really harness that part of yourself. And which brings me to my next question and next topic I want to cover with you is you've mentioned that yourself you got disconnected from that intuition from medication that you were taking for your depression. So if you want to elaborate a little bit about that.
Sure. So I really started understanding that being on medication for bipolar disorder, off and on for 30 years plus, was numbing me. Alcohol and bipolar psychotropic medication kept me from really tapping into my intuition. And the minute that I removed that, it took 6-7 months to kind of remove all the fog that I felt after years of being off and on the medication. I'm very clear about what the signs are and what the signals are and what the messages are since removing that from my body, especially because I'm somatic. And I even experienced more clairs that I had never experienced before when coming off of that. I was like, oh, what's that? We're receiving messages in a different way than I had ever kind of tapped in before because my field was clear.
Yes. And you're not the first one to report that to me, that by, stepping away from the medication, they started to feel, because essentially these medications can be, and here I'm not a doctor, I'm not telling anyone to like stop their medication by all means. That's not the message here, but just to bring awareness that there is a relationship between any drugs or alcohol or medication that we can be taking. So if you are listening and you would like to tap more into your intuition, alcohol could be one that you could just remove or
take it down on. It's
yeah.
it numbs the sensitivity. Like you just become more heightened and clearer in all of your senses, whether you're conscious of it or not. When you start really consciously tapping into however you receive your messages, you'll find that it's amplified by 10 if you're not in some kind of chemical fog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said, well said. Chemical fog. I like that term. Thank you. So it brings me to my next question, because now that you did tap back into your intuition and you're using that in your regular coaching as an astrologer, so why become an intuitive coach and astrologer? How did that happen to you, for you?
Well, I've been really attracted to metaphysics since I was 13 or 14 years old, and I've read tarot for almost 30 years. But with the tarot comes an interest in astrology because it's very cosmically connected. And so I kind of really loosely studied astrology for the last 30 years, but really became a cosmic geek about 10 years ago, where I took a deep dive into evolutionary astrology because of my own path and wanting to evolve to its highest potential. And so I worked on myself first, and then I'm like, oh, this is amazing information. How can I utilize this to help other people who are feeling really stuck?
Absolutely. Well said. I think it's important to talk about the role as a coach is usually to use our own experience to help people that are going through similar experiences, or the tools that work for us for our clients. And so that's key.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, it's such a free will choice of how you want to move through your soul's evolution. And what works for you or what resonates for you may not resonate with somebody else. And that's the beauty of free will and sovereignty, emotional sovereignty, and being in power in your own, what I call, or Lady Gaga's coined quote, meat suit. We're in a meat suit here, and our soul is just borrowing the meat suit for however long we're here on earth, and our soul is if you believe in reincarnation, we evolve in different meat suits through lifetimes, but our soul remains the same in an evolutionary process. And so does that clarify a little bit?
Yeah, the meat suit. I like that. Absolutely. But then that comes back to a little bit to the work that you do as an evolutionary astrologer. So you look at those past life karma and then how to sort of break free from that, and so people can tap into their dharma or the soul's purpose, correct? So if you want to elaborate a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think evolutionary astrology really drew me in because it illuminates this soul-centered perspective in that humans are capable of evolution and have the free will and the capacity of how we embody our experience to evolve. And it's a really empowering tool and self-discovery tool to utilize our shadow and our highest potential in this lifetime. When you look at your individual blueprint, the time, the date, and the place of your birth, that is completely unique to you, you're given points to read and to interpret. And there can be a lot of karmic patterns that we notice within an evolutionary astrology chart, a natal chart, or a lunar node reading, to get very specific about where you are growing from and growing into your highest evolution. So by looking and addressing those patterns, depending on the client's level of consciousness, we move through coaching through that paradigm. And I also utilize human design with that to embody the intellectual information that we're receiving from the analysis of an astrological blueprint, and how to navigate it literally within our meat suit to activate that highest potential in the 3D realm that we live in called life.
Absolutely. So well said. So just so our listeners really get what we're saying, and before we step into human design, because that's where I remember when we did our reading together, I was like, oof, there's something there. Would you say that with your type of astrology, by looking at past karma, you're able to sometimes maybe help people with blocks? You know how sometimes we feel like frustrated because we're always like repeating the same cycles and the same patterns, and we're like, why? And what is it that I need to learn? So would you say that you're able to help people break through so they can launch?
Definitely. I think what happens, in a chart, there can be very present life. I mean, there's obviously present life energy in the soul's evolution in this lifetime that we capitalize on, but there are also instances where sometimes I will get an intuitive hit about a past pattern or past karmic pattern of where somebody's really unconsciously stuck and they don't have the awareness of how to move through that, or even that they need to move through that. It just becomes an outside awareness, with working with an intuitive coach. And I just use evolutionary astrology because it helps validate what somebody might be feeling that they're unaware of. And so, I say that I illuminate the unseen to help you illuminate your brilliance from your shadow self. So what feels dark or stuck or untapped is actually potential to illuminate you into your highest evolution. So does that help? Does that explain?
Absolutely. I mean, the witch is kind of like why we're all here stuck on this earth. It's just to figure it out. You're going to be faced with some darkness and challenges, and until you can figure those out and break free from that, if you believe in the past life and karma, you're kind of like with the Buddhist wheel, like stuck in that forever turning cycle. And so I feel like it's pretty interesting work that you're doing in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people that are into healing, having an awareness around their healing. Sometimes you just can't get the perspective that you need doing it on your own. Sometimes you just need somebody else to shine a light on it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do with my little system.
Yeah, that's what friends are for in
Yeah,
relationships, right? To poke the bear.
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Challenge our ego. So another part of what you do, because you're using astrology, your own intuition, and also human design. And I really, for me, when you told me a little bit more about my human design in a way that I have not been told before, I liked that you mentioned that because I have the sacral authority, essentially my yes and my no comes from my sacral. So my or my intuition center lies in my sacral area, and I find that for me was like, okay, so this is where I need to pay more attention. So the gut feeling area. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about that, in the sense that if people want to tap into their intuition, well, knowing what their human design is might be an essential tool or useful tool to know where to bring awareness in their own body, or how to make decisions based on their human design.
Yeah, first of all, I want to preempt something that I've heard recently, is that people don't want to be labeled by a particular system.
Yeah.
And it's not a label, it's a tool, it's a conscious tool to utilize. And you're not the label of a particular design. Your blueprint, whether it's a human design or an astrological blueprint, is completely unique to you because of your birth time, your birthplace, and your birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And um and so yes, you're going to have a completely unique design based on that information. It's a karmic snapshot. So it's a soul snapshot that is, like I said, completely unique to you. Like, I'm an emotional authority, so I what I learned that was most beneficial for me is that I was always pressured in my life to make immediate decisions about things that really led to extreme stress and anxiety, because my body needed the time to process both the low and the high of an emotional wave before making a really big decision about something.
Mm.
And so sometimes that can be 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
And in the 3D world, it can cause a little bit of conflict, because now I take the time to process that slowly, when I used to create myself literally ulcers, physical ulcers, because I would make a decision felt by the pressure of the immediacy to appease other people. And I am most relaxed when I've been able to roll through the emotional waves, and they can get intense, because I'm kind of an emotional, uh that's my authority, so I feel them very intensely, whether it's a low or a high, and I make my best decisions from that middle ground. So that's how you can utilize and embody that information based on your human design.
That I think that's amazing. It's such a powerful tool, and I like how you mentioned that it's a tool. It's there. It's a blueprint. But again, it can be so different. Like there could be another. There's so many people that have sacral authority, like I do, and I'm a 5-1. I think you mentioned. But then it's like I compare it to a shoe. Like I can be a size 8, you can be a size 8, but my foot is different than yours. Maybe I have a big toe. Maybe my second toe is longer than the other one. Maybe I don't have any arch. Maybe I have too much of an arch. Like, so it's kind of like, yes, there's that, or even in numerology, you're an 8, you're an 11, you're a 9, but there's also
So
so
many
much more.
nuances, right? There's so many
Right.
unique nuances.
Yeah.
And in human design, you're looking at what energy centers are defined or undefined. You're looking at what gates and channels are filled in or not filled in your, it's kind of a map,
Yeah.
like a body map or a body graph.
Hmm.
And and based on those nuances, also in the astrological map, you're looking at where your planets are, in what houses, as opposed to the fact that you were a Leo sun, a Capricorn moon, and an Aries rising, identical to somebody else. It's
Hmm.
never going to be identical, because the nuances are limitless. So there's this limitless potential of information that you can still receive. I I kind of connected to the divine um, in a term that is like unlimited intelligence, or universal intelligence is kind of how I utilize that. And you always hear, oh, well, you are the universe. And I say that a lot because you literally are this untapped potential of information that when you're feeling really stuck, you feel like, oh, I've hit a cul-de-sac, I'm at the end of the road, I have no choices. Here you have this boundless and limitless information to tap into, to utilize it, and then with the human design system, you can activate it and embody it and learn to trust yourself. And that's how I like to use the tool the most, is to create this self-trust, because we've been so conditioned certain way that we end up spending the rest of our lives trying to trust ourselves based on our intuition and not our conditioning.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned self-trust, because for some listeners, maybe the aspect of God or spirit or universal intelligence might be like, whoa, 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 you lost me there.
Right.
This is too much, woo woo. But it's
Yeah.
like Caroline Miss says it so well, if you don't believe in God, at least believe in yourself. So again, coming back to self-trust, understanding your own body. There's so many things out there. There's enneagrams, numerology, astrology, human design. Pick your tool, pick your choose your candy.
Yeah.
And so like using that to get to know yourself, because at the end of the day, know thyself. Knowing yourself is the ultimate key ingredient, I think, to live a more fulfilling life, right?
Yeah, and it's also kind of this innate responsibility that we have to, I call it wielding your weird, or wielding your vessel.
That's good.
that that it's kind of, it's this responsibility that you have to use your meat suit to the best of its capability while you're here on Earth.
Yeah,
Based on your soul's evolution. So whatever tools are out there that resonate with you, use them to expand and to evolve.
absolutely. And tools, I mean, it's why hire a coach, right? It's like, well, I can just go online and put in my birth date and I'll know my human design. So I think if you want to elaborate a little
Yeah,
bit
I
more
think
about.
I think on a certain level you can receive the basic information about that. But again, it's a very complex system, as is astrology on in any kind of astrology. Takes years to kind of create a cohesion of understanding of how it all connects. So
Mhm.
you can identify that you're a, like, I'm a 1-3 emotional authority manifesting generator, and there's the label, but how do I use that information to wield my vessel,
That's
right?
it.
So that's kind of what I assist with, is
Absolutely.
getting into the nuances of how do I operate? How do I make the choices to step into my highest evolution based on my design?
Exactly. Like we said, it's not a one size fits all. And with all these nuances, with a coach, they can see things that you might not necessarily see in yourself, and guide you through the process. So I think that's key to mention. So if people want to work with you, Sabina, what do they do?
You can find me on both Facebook and Instagram at Soul's Purpose Coaching, and there will be a link tree on there where I have my offers. You can also DM me on either what is it called? Either in social media.
Yeah.
You can DM me if you have specific questions, or you can send me an email. The email's there. It's Sabina at soulspurposecoaching.com, or tap into my link tree and connect with me.
Yeah, and the links will be provided below in the podcast description. So you can just click on it, reach out to Sabina, get to know a little bit more about your unique blueprint, and good luck with your journey to self. Sabina, thank you so much for this interview, for your time. I think this was amazing. I hope that our listeners enjoyed. And until next time.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a really fun to delight and connect about, it just kind of all makes me excited to share that information with people,
Yes.
knowing that they have choices to evolve.
Amazing. I think, yeah, you said a keyword, the word choice, realizing that we do have more choices sometimes that can be perceived. And by removing some of those blocks and tapping into our intuition and getting to know ourselves through different ways, we can live the life that is meant for you, and live our dharma, like you say.
Yes.
So
Yes. So thanks, Chantal.